So while I was looking through all those articles, looking at all the games people thought were scary, um, came across an article that was from Game Informer, and it was about how horror can enhance non-horror games for the better. And I didn't really need to read it because I knew what they were talking about, and I was
You didn't read the article?
I did. I breezed through it. I did breeze through the article.
Okay.
But I was more or less looking at what they were talking about for examples. I wanted to get to those parts. And so they did make some interesting points in there, mostly about like The Last of Us, Bioshock, Outer Wilds Gone Home. Those were some good ones. And I have to say, like, I'm familiar with these games. I understand what they're probably talking about. But I was kind of wondering about your point of view about what happens when you put horror into what you would consider a non-horror game. Should we define that better, or?
Yeah, we should totally define that better.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can't define the difference. Let's start here. Let's see if we can define the difference between a horror game and a game with horror elements.
Perfect.
Okay, I would say the difference here is a horror game is a game that relies specifically on horror for the game to function properly.
Okay.
Without a horror element, the game doesn't work correctly. I would say that a game with horror elements is like a game that works in normal fashion but uses a horror element at certain points but isn't really focused on it. It's not like it doesn't need to use it. It's not going to make or break the game because that's not thematically necessary for it. Would you agree with that, or would you like to try and define that a little better?
I would tend to agree with that. The iffy one there is the horror games, in a lot of cases, could still function without the horror elements. I want to say depending on the game.
Okay.
I think the bulk of the experience comes from those horror elements, however.
Right. Especially when it comes to things that are story-driven. I think that you can have story-driven games that use some horror elements in it, but aren't really focused on it. But then there are ones where if there was not a horrific narrative to it or a scary nature to it, the game just would not really function properly. It wouldn't work. So the examples that they gave, like Gone Home, there's a good example of that. That is a walking simulator. It is there for you to go around a house that is kind of dark. It's your parents' house. They just moved there. There's moving boxes all over the place. You don't know what happened to your sister. You're trying to figure that out. And the house is completely dark, and you're kind of going around turning on the lights and finding out why the generator's not running, and there's, creaks in this house and everything. And then, of course, the very, very terrifying cat video. People who know that that's the biggest jump scare in the entire thing. There's a part you can throw like a little foam ball into one of those door basketball nets that you put over the thing, and when you make the basket, a cat video on the television just comes on out of nowhere.
Okay.
It makes no sense because there's like a cognitive thing where it's like, this doesn't cause this to happen, and the rest of the game does. But yeah, that's like the one straight up scary thing. But the idea of going around the house in this dark and creaky old setting that was your uncle's house, and what happens in the back doors and stuff like that, that has horror elements to it, but it is not the focus of the game. The focus of the game is to try and figure out what happened to your sister and find out her story, basically.
Right. It uses the environment to enhance that as a horror element, I believe. It's kind of the vibe I'm getting from that.
Yeah. If you were to take, let me put it to you this way. If you were to take the story just by itself, without any of the graphic elements, and they explain the story to you, it would not seem horrific at all.
Right. If you had the house and it was all well lit and it didn't creak and you took out those ambient sounds, it would be like, okay.
Yeah, the story still works, The whole story still works. The characters still work. Everything still works. But by adding in the fact that it is this house that you are all alone in, that is this very large old house that obviously has a lot of history to it, that your family had just moved into, it adds this tension that there could be anything around the corner.
Right.
And so that does enhance the game by giving it a completely different tone, even though the story doesn't necessarily rely on that. The other example, so Last of Us, you might not be familiar with Last of Us, but I have played it.
Fairly familiar, never played it.
Yeah, you know the concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cordyceps.
Cordyceps, yeah, exactly. What if the world fell because of an outbreak of mycelial fungus, basically? And terrifying, actually terrifying, if true. But one of the things is that that's pretty much an action game. Like, you don't really need horror elements for that to work. But when you get down into, like, cellars and sewers, where the clickers are that will like insta-kill you if you make too much noise around them, there's an automatic tension. And by creating that automatic tension, it makes you rethink even the way you're playing those sections, as opposed to, like, if you're dealing with raiders or scavengers or something like that out in the wilds. Because a lot of those times you'll just be straight up, in shootouts and stuff, and just dodging around and hiding behind your waist-high cover. When you get into those sections, though, all of a sudden it becomes a hide-and-seek game.
Right.
You have to change your entire way of playing. I wouldn't say the entire game is like that, but certain sections are. And then the other one that they talk about a lot is Bioshock, which thematically, again, very similar fashion. The way the world of Rapture is put out there is claustrophobic. There's always water coming in the entire time you're going through that underwater city. There are dangers around every corner. There are multiple ways you can approach different scenarios. When you get there, you're not particularly powerful for the majority of the game. And
I wouldn't necessarily call any of that horror element, though.
Okay.
Maybe the claustrophobia.
Maybe the claustrophobia. I always figured that if you're underpowered in a lot of games, though, it's a little bit... It makes it a little scarier.
Suspenseful and tension, maybe, but I wouldn't call it horror.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that makes it a horrifying or terrifying experience.
Okay.
Just like I wouldn't necessarily call Dark Souls any sort of terror or horror type of game.
No, it's
I would
just
say it just ramps the tension
annoying.
up. Yeah, just annoying. It just kind of ramps that tension up because
Right.
you need to take the pacing and stuff at a different way than you might normally.
Right. I mean, tension is a good way to create fear, or at least to be
Sure.
a starting point for it.
But tension doesn't always
narratively.
equate to fear.
Okay. Yeah. The Bioshock, though, is also one of those games where if you took out the claustrophobic atmosphere and everything like that, the game and the storyline still functions.
Yeah, I think for like Bioshock, the creep factor would come from like the little sisters
And the big
that type of
daddies.
stuff,
Yeah.
and the big daddies, and probably more the story elements than the environmental elements for
Mhm.
that, aside from the claustrophobia,
Yeah.
which again is not necessarily horror, but it is indicative of putting you in a space that makes you feel that tension more.
Right. There are
Um,
some characters in Bioshock, though, I will say, that will absolutely terrify you.
Sure, absolutely.
There are some
And I was telling you before we recorded, the channel Inside of Mind did a great video, at least one, on There's Something in the Sea, which is, I believe, an ARG or promotional tie-in to Bioshock.
Okay.
I think Bioshock 2. Where it's got this whole story of events going on I won't spoil it for you, but the guy's looking for his daughter that was stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with some of the scientists and all that stuff. But that one, the video he did is really good, and it explains it in really good detail for those of you, us, who did not know that was a thing.
Mhm.
I sent Nathan a link. If people want a link, we could probably throw one in our video description as well for this
Yeah.
segment.
Sure.
It's a good video. And it definitely sets the stage a lot more as well. It's that setup to the game that
Yeah.
actually would add a lot of that,
Mm.
not classic horror, but a lot of that tension and expectation.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm just thinking back to some of them. Like, ironically, is this a spoiler? I don't know if this is a spoiler, but no. What I'd say is thematically, if you look at like all of the Bioshock games, Bioshock 1, 2, and Infinite, there usually is some kind of an element of a father trying to find his child. There's some of it in there, sometimes more directly in few of them than others. But that's a big theme, which by the time you get to the end of Infinite starts to maybe make a little bit more sense, but that's a whole other discussion for people who have never played Infinite. Not going to ruin it for you. Just go play the game. I'm still a stand for Infinite though. I know there were people that really liked the first game and didn't like Infinite, and I don't understand you. I don't understand you. But on the one hand though, since we're on this topic, Infinite does not really have horror themes for the majority of the time that you are playing. There are one or two sections.
Wasn't Infinite a lot brighter
Oh yes.
as color schemes and everything?
Columbia is completely different than Rapture because it's a city in the sky. It's not a city under the sea.
It's not a rundown city underwater.
It's a rundown city in the sky and on floating platforms. Yeah.
It's a lot less terrifying when you don't have to think about all the pressure that's coming down on you.
Yeah. But see, as the game goes on and the storms start to become more relevant, like you get into stormy weather toward the end, all of a sudden now it starts to feel a little bit more serious. But there are a few places where they're almost like wraiths or specters come into play that gets a lot more tense
There you go.
than that. And then they also mentioned Outer Wilds, which also got bored. Seems to just going to continue. Sorry, I know there's a lot of people that love Outer Wilds. I understand the reason. It was not for me. But there is one planet where you go into like this murky, like the middle of the planet. There's all kinds of thorns and stuff. And like this giant anglerfish just comes out of nowhere and just eats you. And then it starts your time loop over again.
There you go.
That's usually what they're talking about with Terrify. It kind of comes out of nowhere. There are a few sections where it's kind of like, this is a weird place. But, again, from a narrative thematic, you didn't really necessarily need it. All the clues and the, the stuff that you explore tells that tale just fine if you didn't get scared by it. But it puts you into that state of tension to also keep you awake and engaged.
Which apparently didn't work for you.
It did not work for me, no, sorry. I always feel like there is a certain engagement when you have a tense experience with something in a way that, just informationally, it would not work. Yeah, because like, you can tell all these stories where it's just informational, like, yeah, and then the cordyceps got into everybody's heads, and some of them click a lot, and they'll kill you instantaneously, yada yada yada. We need to get something out of your head in order to save the human race, so gonna get that done. But if you don't have the tense elements of that, it feels like a laundry list, a PowerPoint presentation of sorts for a game.
I think a PowerPoint list would be a far more terrifying game than some of these ones.
Oh, yeah. Especially,
PowerPoints are
especially if they tell you that it's like these are 100 strategies. 100 strategies to figure out like which bread works best with your caviar or something.
I don't think you have bread with caviar, do you? I think it's crackers.
Maybe you have crackers. I don't know.
Are crackers a bread?
Cra-
Who cares?
Are
Anyways.
crackers a bread? We have to stop making everything food themed. I don't know how we do this.
The last episode was all food themed.
It was all food all the time.
And it was delicious.
It was so good. Cobalts. Anyway.
That thumbnail for the ham sandwich one?
On point.
On point. On
Beautiful.
point.
Can
Love
do
it.
Nah, great. Though there was one though that stuck in my head when the phrase stuck in my head, which is also terrifying. You don't want to go in there. It's terrifying. When we get to horror and non-horror games, which was New Vegas. All the Fallout games do have parts in them where it can get a little bit scary, like the Dunwich building in Fallout 3, or like the Salem Witch Museum in 4. They usually have something. But New Vegas was the one that actually had an entire DLC that straight up turned the game into a horror survival. And that was Dead Money. It was the first one that they released. I don't know if you ever played it.
No,
but I
didn't. I've heard about it. I know about it. I've seen people play it.
Yep, and it's not even the best of the DLCs in my opinion, but I did appreciate it for the fact that it made that complete tonal change.
Yeah,
and keeps you there, keeps you at the Sierra Madre for the entire time that you're playing. You can't leave. You're there.
Well, you could leave.
Well, yeah, but it's game over.
But you wouldn't survive.
You wouldn't survive.
You would explode.
You would explode. Yeah, the whole idea behind that, in case anyone hasn't played it, I've played it enough times I can probably tell you the general theme, is you get snatched up from the Mojave. This character called Father Elijah needs some unwilling volunteers to break into the Sierra Madre and get all of its treasures, the Sierra Madre Casino. So in order to make that happen, you and 3 other very unfortunate participants get bomb collars strapped to you, so that you have to do what Father Elijah wants you to. And to make that even worse, there are all of these what did they call them? Were they the shadow people? They had gas masks on and they have like bear traps on their fists, and they basically just want to kill you. There's a smog around the entire place, a red mist that will eat your health away immediately when you enter into the cloud. And also any electronic interference will start your bomb collar ticking.
Nice.
So there's that. So if you have a radio that's on over in the corner, you have a limited amount of time to either get past it or go and turn off that radio before, again, tick, tick, boom. And your head leaves your body by unwilling methodology. And that's unfortunate. That is the entire DLC is just that. They drop you in, you hardly have any weapons to your name. Very limited ammunition. Everybody wants to kill you, and it's straight up a horror survival game at that point, right up until the end. That, I have to be honest with you, narratively didn't need any of that in order for it to tell the basic story.
Right.
But the story would have kind of been boring as hell, because the story then basically becomes about this guy who's fanatical about getting into this vault that no one was really supposed to get into.
Yeah.
And in order to essentially begin again or recapture something, and that he's never going to recapture. Not a very strong theme without the actual tension of what they set up there. So there is that. Do you know of any games, or have you played any games where there might have been either intentional or unintentional horror themes when otherwise there wouldn't be?
Not as much. Horror's not really a thing I play too often. Like, I would say DDLC, but again, that is a psychological horror game. As much as you hated it, as much as I knew that those elements were already there, like I
Right.
get it, they were there. The story would have been without those elements, it wouldn't have been the same story. It
No.
wouldn't have been the same game at all.
No.
Um, so for what it was, it did a really good job. If the delivery wasn't the best because it required you to do things that were unintuitive,
Right.
for a lot of people. But again, I don't really do a lot of horror so much. I want to look
Right.
through my games kind of
Sure.
really quick.
Yeah. While you're doing that too, I will say that like DDLC is an example of like I would say a straight up horror game because it really does need that in order for it to function properly.
Yeah, it's straight up psychological horror.
Yeah.
It's disguised as a game that's not though, which is a good twist
Yeah. I still
on,
love
on the genre.
I still love the fact that Yahtzee's comment on it was that it is free, and that's probably the best price for it.
They did DDLC Plus. That's like $15.
Oh, okay. So maybe
Um,
that would be. But the reason he said that was because chances are most of the people that played it, thinking that it was a straight up dating sim, would want their money back anyway.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I think one game I've got that would do so well with horror elements in it is actually The Hunter Call of the Wild.
Yeah, we were discussing like if that was cryptids or something like that, you know?
Crave and I have discussed, and I think they occasionally do Halloween themed stuff.
Hmm.
Maybe? Allegedly, it might be on the classic one. I haven't seen anything about it. I've been trying to keep an eye out because if they do a Halloween event, I
Picking
want
that
to
up.
play it.
Oh yeah.
But the game, I've talked about it a couple times. It's a hunting game, and it's got the open world environment where you can explore all of the entire map wherever you want. It's got all the animals. It's nothing really creepy about it. But at night, it's again environmental.
Yeah.
So you're walking through the woods at night, and it's like, can you imagine if there's like a skinwalker in that game?
Yeah.
And like you just kind of hear like occasionally you'll hear growls or howls of wolves and stuff like that from the pumas or
Oh, yeah.
the lions, and you'll hear that stuff, and the bears, and you'll hear their sounds.
Sure.
So you're hearing all the animal sounds in your headphones.
Yep.
Just imagine like low growl of like a skinwalker,
Mm-hmm.
and then like not expecting it, and suddenly you're getting charged by like some cryptid
Mm-hmm.
with like the head of the skull face of a deer and these black pits of eyes and these giant talons. Like that'd be utterly terrifying.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Like I would love that though. Like I would be terrified.
Oh yeah. It would be a terrifying experience. I've played my fair share of the Hunter.
No, you haven't.
Okay.
No, you haven't.
Not by comparison, no.
Not
I
by
suppose.
comparison.
Not by comparison. Sort of like Elite Dangerous. I have played it, but not nearly as much as you. But
Oh, you've played how many hours? Let's see. How many? I don't know. I don't know. You've been playing other games.
oh, I have been playing other games. Yeah, you probably see Elix in there quite a bit lately, and also Medieval Dynasty. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Also the Ascent.
Oh, you've played 7.4 hours of The Hunter.
Yeah, I played about.
That's not a
7.
fair amount, Nathan. That's nothing.
That's like
I've got 240 hours more.
7.5 hours is like what 40 hours in cat years or something like that.
Yeah, I've got 247 hours in The Hunter.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. No, I get it. I don't know. Medieval Dynasty is one of those games though where I can get out a bow and I can like kill a bison in about 3 hits. So
Perfect.
not doesn't, and they kind of just like walk around and wait for you to shoot them most of the time until you do, and then they run away. But,
Hey, I mean, I've definitely killed a bison in one shot in a hunter.
oh, that's good.
I
That's
think I used a bow for
hard
that one.
Oh yeah,
Good times.
I was never good with the bow and hunter,
The bow is so good. Anyways,
but that's regardless. But hey, you know the bow would be really good to hunt cryptids. That would be wonderful. We could go out and get a skinwalker or a wendigo, something like that. That would be amazing.
I think you need silver arrows for that.
No, that would
I
be.
think that I know it's werewolves, but I feel like they would function on the same rules.
I mean, on that note, another side note. This is something I always wondered about with the lore of The Witcher. Is that there's 2 swords, right? There's steel for humans and silver for monsters.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you just have a silver sword? It will work for people too. You could just use the silver sword for everything.
I don't know. Silver's a softer material than steel, so I
Maybe?
imagine.
I don't know. I figured anything that kills a monster, for most parts.
Yeah, but
is
monsters
also,
don't
like,
usually wear armor, so maybe that's it.
Maybe that's it. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, a laser sword for everything. You can kill everything with a laser.
Truth, except for a mirror.
Yeah, can't kill mirrors with lasers. But your optometrist will probably thank you. That will be a visit, and you'll make some money off of that.
Why don't we just call them LASIK swords?
Oh my goodness, I would love to have a LASIK sword. You shine it. The only sword where if you get poked in the eye, it improves your vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good sword. I feel like we got off topic again.
Do we ever stay on topic?
Nope. So anyway, yeah, no, I would say that adding tension to games, just tension as a general rule, doesn't have to be horror, so to speak. But depending on what your narrative is, can be a very effective tool at enhancing the story, even if it's not really reliant on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tension is a hell of a drug.
Tension is a hell of a drug. That's got to be a song, right?
It's now the title of the episode.
Tension is a hell of a drug. That's right. I don't know. I think LASIK swords
Sorry. Tension is a heck of a drug.
is a heck of a drug. A hexagon of a drug. Let's just...